Hey, sleepy friends. This is my comic book thoughts for comics I read over the past week or so. There's 10 of them altogether. Some of them are Marvel subscription copies that I got a little late, so they're from previous weeks. I'm not sure exactly what. Just two of them in there. I also just got Daredevil yesterday, but haven't got around to reading it. I'm sure it would be one of my top books. I actually liked everything here, but I've kind of ranked it in order that I liked it. So I'll start with the one that I enjoyed but was ranked lowest in my mind, just for a way of ordering things. So the one that I enjoyed the Hulk, but it didn't make a big impression on me. It's the third issue of the rebooted Mark Waid Hulk. And I have recently learned that Mark Waid will be off this in a few more issues. So that seems too bad to me, because with issue 1 he seemed to be ramping up again and maybe getting a better hook on the Hulk than he'd had in the past, with this whole thing of the Hulk having brain damage and an unfinished brain surgery. And there is an interesting thing he's doing with it in here towards the end, or when he turns back into Bruce Banner, and there's weird things going on with his mind and stuff, which I found very intriguing. But but large portions of the book were just kind of action that that I didn't find that interesting to read. I mean, I'm not against action. Sometimes it's really captivating, but somehow it just seemed like standard slugfest between the Abomination and the Hulk, going on for more pages than really interested me. Maybe also continuing on from last issue that had a lot of a slugfest from the Abomination and the Hulk. Mark Bagley's a really experienced comic book writer. I love this cover, by the way. That's a great Hulk cover. An experienced comic book artist, and I would have expected him to do more inventive things with the fight scene than he did. But also Mark Waid didn't really come up with much interesting stuff to be going on during the fight scene. So in the end, it became an almost not very memorable comic book, although there were a few interesting touches. And Maria Hill even has I often have a problem with the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, because I feel like Maria Hill is not a well-defined character. But I sort of was starting to get hopes that something interesting might be going on here with Maria Hill, along with the Hulk. So anyway, an okay issue. And even though the art was not that inventive, maybe in the fight scene, it's pretty decent art. Also, maybe a little lower down on my list than I would have expected, because I really liked issue 1 of Conan the Avenger, is issue 2 of Conan the Avenger, which is just the continuing adventures of Conan after the death of Belet. And it's a pretty typical, standard Conan story, so it delivers a certain amount of fun. And has Conan mixing it up with some African magic, which is done a little bit in a different way. The approach to magic's a little different than what I'm used to in Conan books, which was all to the good. Maybe the art and coloring didn't wow me as much as I thought it would. I remember really liking the art in issue 1. It's the same artist, presumably the same colorist, but it just didn't do a whole lot for me. So it was an okay issue of Conan. Sovereign, issue 3, things finally really start to happen here. And all of our characters, who seem so far apart, are already all together now, which is good. And demons, or the souls of the dead, or something else are coming back and taking over bodies, apparently focused on this court where the 3 brothers have to decide who's going to be king, or battle it out between them for who's going to be king. So there's a lot of plot threads coming together right here. So I really, my interest level is upped on Sovereign. I now feel like next issue I'll see, well, where is he going to take these elements that he's put in place, putting in the final sort of initial element of this invasion from the spirit world, or the demon world, or the world of the dead, it's not totally original, but it's fun. There's something about the storytelling, I guess the visual storytelling about Sovereign that's slightly quirky. I always feel like I'm seeing things from different angles than I would expect. And I guess sometimes we're seeing what one character sees and other characters don't see. Like, I think this picture is not what the other characters see, but it took me a number of double takes to figure that out. And what the character with the vision to see the demons is seeing here is a confusing miasma, a confusing swirl of shapes that's hard to parse and not very attractive. So it's almost like this purposefully ugly art style combined with just some odd perspectives. I don't mean like angle perspectives, but which angle you're seeing the character at, and who sometimes you're seeing characters who are looking at something but you don't see what they're looking at, for instance. So it's interesting. Is it more artistic or is it confused storytelling? I'm not quite sure. I'll keep up with Sovereign. I like it. I like something different, and I like fantasy stories, and it's a $2.99 comic book. Here's a $3.99 comic book, which is also kind of a science fiction / fantasy story, kind of a very small number of people call clockpunk. It might also be viewed as a subsection of steampunk or something. We're in some kind of alternate world where everything, a whole solar system is on gears like clockwork, which I have seen in one novel called Mainspring by Jay Lake. I don't know if anyone else has done it. I think I saw a reference to someone else having done something like this. So this must be there's the city that's part with the shaft of the clockwork going through it, and the whole city has a bit of a gear-like design to it. So there's a lot of cool visuals here. This is from 2000 AD, the British publisher. I don't know if this is their first time publishing something in the US as 2000 AD, but it's the first time I remember seeing it. Because this is published directly for the US market. Doesn't have a UK price on it. It was $3.99, but it was 30 pages. Very, very nice cover stock. Good quality paper. So it's definitely worth the money. Still, because it's $3.99, I can't decide whether to keep getting it. And after reading it, somewhere online I saw that this was part 1 of 6. So it's just a graphic novel, basically. Unless they're going to do 6 and then another miniseries, perhaps. So I wasn't deeply caring about the characters, but I'm interested about the situation, and that there's a religion involved and then heretics to the religion, and the religion is probably a lie about what the world is really like. So it's familiar science fiction territory, but done in its own way. So I like it, but do I like it enough to get the rest of the issues, or do I wait for a trade, which I still might save money off of having read this first issue and then buying a trade. So I'm undecided on that. But it is a good comic book. Also, it does look like it was maybe reformatted, because there's so much white space on the bottom and the top, reformatted from a different size publication. Maybe this was originally in 2000 AD, the anthology magazine that comes out at weekly in Britain. I'm not I suspect that's the case. And maybe their pages are a different proportion. So, the other thing I wanted to say is it definitely has a very different pacing and timing to it as a comic book than what we're familiar with in current comic books. It feels a bit more like the timing of a novel, maybe. Or maybe it's just a more European way of timing a comic book. How fast the story develops and which details of the story we learn ahead of time. I think a lot of American comic book writers or people writing for Image and Marvel would stretch this story out for several issues, just this opening sort of setting up thing, because there's several big beats which are probably not played as big as they would be in an American comic book, for good or bad. I can't really even say whether it's good or bad. I like Green Lanterns a lot. I don't think it was my favorite issue of the Green Lanterns. There's been some really good ones. And it didn't emphasize the sense of a family forming as much as other issues, which is kind of what's the biggest hook for this, is this group of oddballs and strange characters becoming, you know, how groups of friends can become like a family, particularly if they don't fit in with anyone else. And this was particularly emphasized by throwing Supergirl in the mix, and I really like that. But this one was more focused on Atrocitus and this new character, the Judge, who may be going to become part of the family, but isn't yet, and it didn't sort of focus on her side of it. Still, you know, lots of cool big moments, really cool art. As I've said before, Alessandro Vitti has really grown on me, the main artist in the Red Lanterns. Yeah, so a good continuation. I think this is kind of bringing the writer's issue for bringing together some of his plot threads so that they can really, so that the plot can continue in the next issue with all the things brought together. Basically, the separate threads of this Judge character and Atrocitus and Supergirl and the other Red Lanterns, all now together, kind of in the same braided. The threads have braided together and are going to be a single passageway, at least for a while. Batman Eternal, I already did a really long video on this. This was, as I've said, one of the better issues. Still not as good as maybe the first 3 issues, but it feels like Batman Eternal's back on track. And so I definitely feel good about getting it weekly and having the fun of the weekly comic book. And I will continue to do, for the foreseeable future, I will continue to do a Batman video every week, because it's just sort of fun to do a weekly chronicle of my thoughts on it. Very good issue of Adventures of Superman. It's up and down, there have been a lot of good issues of Adventures of Superman. They're all standalone stories. This was a 30-page standalone story about Metallo, but really about this reporter who believes that Superman is a invention of the Daily Planet to get better sales, and he's going to break the story wide open. And of course, things don't go the way he's expecting them to. And at first, I had a little trouble of adjusting to the art. None of the characters look like they normally do, but in the long run of reading the 30 pages of it, I really like the art. The artist is listed on the last page, I think, in very small letters. Gabriel Rodriguez. That name sounds familiar, but I don't know from where. And B. Claymore was the writer. So just another really good sort of classic Superman standalone, out of continuity story. It felt, at 30 pages, it felt like a good episode of if there were an hour-long Superman show or something. It felt like a good chunk of story. So yeah. Still at the top of its game is Thor, God of Thunder, Part 4 of Last Days of Midgard, and it says it's to be concluded next issue. Now I'm wondering, like last time, there was the God Killer, and then there was the God Bomb, and they were really all one story, but they were broken up into five chapter parts. So 2 5-chapter parts. So I wonder if this is again, or whether we're really going to get this story all wrapped up, the battle against Old Galactus, plus the battle against this Minotaur who runs Roxxon. But in any case, the art continues on a really high level. The story is fun. The characterization of old and new Thor. I really dug the appearance of the trolls. Both the way they look, their appearance, but their appearance in the story. Just nice little bit of classic Thor stuff. The trolls were always showing up in the old Thor comics, but done in a way that keeps in keeping with the modern Thor tone that's done here. Really fun to see Thor's 3 granddaughters fighting Galactus. So yeah, really fun issue. So it was my number 3. There's 2 more that are better. Not that these numbers or these rankings mean a whole lot. As I said, I've enjoyed all these comics. But so Thor was really good. I feel like Marvel is really good right now, and I'm not getting a lot of Marvel because I'm waiting on it for various, either digitally or trades, and then I just get a few through subscriptions and a few $2.99 ones that I buy in my store. But anyway, one of the very best comics right now in superheroes, I think, is Ms. Marvel, and totally wonderful cover, and the writing and the art, the art is quite quirky, continue as they have in all the other issues to be really good. The development of the characters, her and her friends and her family, is really great. And it does end. I was sort of hoping more would be wrapped up in 4 issues, but the story is a bit stretched out. But it's so enjoyable. I mean, I'm not complaining in any super kind of big way. Except maybe that I feel like until the story's complete, I can't read it with my daughter. In fact, and I have to make sure it doesn't go in any disturbing directions, which it's hinting at a little bit of a disturbing direction with some superpowered person keeping kids who are kind of his criminal cult followers locked up in this burnt out old house or something. Or maybe not locked up, but anyway, interesting. I love that she can. I love the way they play with her ability to do different sizes, to become different sizes. I hope they kind of leave her power at that and just explore all of the gradations of that. But maybe she'll be flying soon, since she's shown to be flying on the cover, or maybe just jumping. It's a weird comparison, but the art in here is nothing like Steve Ditko's, but it makes me think of how in early Spider-Man all the characters were not attractive in the normal comic book sense. They were all odd, quirky looking characters, and this has that vibe too of just a quirkiness to it that makes it feel a little more real in a way. The way the humbleness, in a sense, of the way things looked in the Steve Ditko Spider-Mans. So I continue to feel like this is the Spider-Man for now. You know, Spider-Man has just been around so long. This is a new vibe. It has that vibe of the early Spider-Mans, but done in a totally modern setting with modern characters and everything. But yeah, a great comic. Now, I don't know if this would be the number 1 comic book for everybody, The Trees by Warren Ellis, but since I'm a huge science fiction fan, and I love, mostly which I've encountered in novels, the kind of science fiction with some big, mysterious alien thing appearing, and the long process of trying to figure out what it is and what it's doing to humanity. So this book is so up my alley. And on top of that, it's done, this first brief chapter of it, which kind of is just all set up for setting up different story threads and setting up the fact that Earth has been somehow colonized by these giant columns, alien columns that have just appeared with no explanation and that seem to view humans as less than ants. But the art is great. The storytelling pacing is great. I love how look on that first page, it sort of comes off the title page into the first page, a kite flying up in the air, which seems to be a great, visual for that. And then we get these futuristic high-tech police chasing the kids through the favelas streets in Rio. And when the giant columns land, this incredible shot of Jesus the Redeemer looking out over Rio, the classic Rio image. But Rio is an amazing geographically speaking city, with this Christ the Redeemer really kind of pulling all its elements together visually. But so I feel like great choices made. Then we go to New York and we go to China, to this sort of crazy city, maybe a crazy city of artists that live in the shadow of the giant columns. Makes me think of how Berlin, which used to be surrounded by the West Berlin, used to be surrounded by the communist Germany, and was this kind of crazy city of artists, as I understand it. I never visited there. And then I love the images of the black flowers that grow on and around these columns in the Arctic waste, or near the Arctic, Spitsbergen, which I think is part of Norway. So really love this art style, which is kind of scratchy, just tells the story really well. I don't think I've ever seen Jason Howard art before, but I'm really enjoying it. So Trees is, going to be one of those books, I think. It's hard to tell with just one issue, of course. I think it's going to be one of those books like Black Science is for me, and Alex and Ada, that I really look forward to every month. And that is, far away from the world of superheroes. Just comic books exploring more and more cool things they can do with science fiction, which I'm all into. I love that. Okay, guys, my lunch break I probably pushed my lunch break a bit to the edge here, so I gotta go. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you later in the week. Bye-bye.